The autumn rain hammered against the windows of Henderson and Associates law firm in downtown Chicago, creating a rhythmic percussion that seemed to mock the silence inside Conference Room B. Marcus Chen sat at the far end of the mahogany table, his worn jacket a stark contrast to the tailored suit surrounding him. 23 years old, with calloused hands that told stories his mouth never would, he watched his half-brothers Julian and Trevor lean back in their leather chairs with the casual arrogance of men who'd never questioned their place in the world. The lawyer, Arthur Henderson, adjusted his wire-rimmed glasses and cleared his throat. Outside, the Chicago skyline was barely visible through the October downpour, the Willis Towers peak lost in gray clouds. The smell of expensive cologne and old money filled the air, making Marcus acutely aware of the motor oil still embedded under his fingernails from his morning shift at Garcia's Auto Repair. "Thank you all for coming," Henderson began, his voice carrying the practiced neutrality of someone who delivered both good and terrible news 1,000 times before. "As you know, we're here for the reading of Richard Chen's last will and testament." Marcus felt his chest tighten. Richard Chen. The man he'd called father for exactly 6 months before the heart attack took him. 6 months of awkward Sunday dinners where Julian and Trevor would discuss their corporate positions while Marcus pushed food around his plate, feeling like an intruder in a world he'd never been invited to join. "To my sons, Julian and Trevor," Henderson continued, "who have carried forward the Chen legacy with distinction, I leave my collection of classic automobiles." He paused, looking up. "Specifically, the 1967 Shelby GT 500, the 1963 Corvette Stingray, and the 2018 Porsche 911 Turbo S. Trevor's face broke into a satisfied smile. Julian nodded slowly, as if he'd expected nothing less. Marcus kept his eyes fixed on a water stain on the ceiling, shaped vaguely like a bird in flight. He'd seen those cars in Richard's private garage once, gleaming under perfect lighting like museum pieces. Together, they were worth close to $1 million. "Additionally," Henderson said, "I'm transferring full ownership of Chen Technologies' downtown office building to Julian and the pharmaceutical investment portfolio, valued at approximately $2.3 million, to Trevor." The numbers echoed in Marcus's head. He'd grown up in a 2-bedroom apartment in Pilsen with his mother, Maria, who'd worked double shifts as a nurse just to keep them fed. She died of pneumonia when he was 19. Never once asking Richard Chen for help, never once explaining why his father's name appeared on his birth certificate, but not in their lives. Marcus had only learned about Richard 5 years ago, when a private investigator showed up at the auto shop where he worked. The old man had been dying even then, his heart failing, and something had compelled him to reach out to the son he'd abandoned before birth, the son from an affair he'd hidden for over 2 decades. And finally, Henderson's voice dropped slightly. "To Marcus Chen, my youngest son, I leave the contents of my personal safe deposit box at First National Bank." The room fell silent, except for the rain. Trevor let out a short, bitter laugh. "A safe deposit box? That's it?" Julian's expression remained neutral, but Marcus caught the flicker of satisfaction in his eyes. "Well," Julian said smoothly, "I suppose father knew where his loyalties lay." Marcus felt heat rise to his face, but he forced himself to remain still. He'd expected nothing. Actually, receiving nothing would have been easier than this public humiliation. A safe deposit box probably contained old photographs or maybe some modest savings Richard felt obligated to leave him. Guilt money, a consolation prize for existing. Henderson cleared his throat uncomfortably. "The reading is concluded. Marcus, if you could stop by my office tomorrow at 10, I'll provide you with the key and access documents." The meeting dissolved. Julian and Trevor left first, already on their phones, probably calling their wives to share the good news. Marcus remained seated, watching the rain streak down the windows, distorting the city lights into watercolor abstracts. "Marcus," Henderson said quietly. The room was empty now, except for them. "Your father was a complicated man." "He wasn't my father," Marcus replied flatly. "He was a stranger who happened to share my DNA." He stood, grabbing his backpack. "Thanks for your time, Mr. Henderson." Walking out into the October rain, Marcus didn't bother with his hood. The cold water soaked through his hair, ran down his neck, but he barely noticed. His phone buzzed. A text from his girlfriend, Sarah. "How'd it go?" He typed back. "About as expected. Got a mystery box. Probably contains his old watch or something." 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. "Want me to come over?" "Nah. Got the night shift. I'll see you tomorrow." Marcus walked 12 blocks to the Red Line station, too angry to care about the rain, too tired to process the disappointment. A homeless woman sat under the elevated tracks, her cardboard sign bleeding ink in the downpour. Marcus pulled out his wallet and gave her the $20 bill he'd been planning to use for groceries. She looked up, surprised, and whispered, "God bless you, son." He nodded and descended into the station, the smell of wet concrete and subway air wrapping around him like a familiar blanket. This was his Chicago. Not the penthouse views and corporate boardrooms his half-brothers inhabited, not the private garages and investment portfolios, just the L train, the night shifts, the constant grind of making rent and hoping his car lasted another 6 months. At Garcia's auto repair, his boss, Miguel, was locking up. "Thought you had the night off? Changed my mind. Need the overtime." Miguel studied him with knowing eyes. The old man had been more of a father to Marcus in 5 years than Richard Chen had managed in 6 months. "The will thing? Yeah, they screw you?" Marcus managed a weak smile. "Wasn't anything to screw me out of. I was never really part of the family." Miguel squeezed his shoulder. "Their loss, mijo. Their loss." That night, Marcus lost himself in the familiar rhythm of work. Oil changes, brake repairs, a transmission that needed rebuilding. His hands knew these movements like a language, finding problems by touch and sound. By 3 a.m. he was covered in grease and exhausted enough that his brain had finally stopped replaying the meeting. He caught the first morning train home, watching Chicago wake up through smudged windows, delivery trucks rolling through empty streets, street cleaners washing away the night's debris, workers heading to early shifts, faces blank with exhaustion or lost in their phones. These were his people. Not the ones in corner offices making decisions that affected thousands of lives they'd never meet. His apartment in Pilsen was a studio above a taqueria. The smell of corn tortillas and chorizo drifted up through the floorboards every morning. His bed was a mattress on the floor. His kitchen was a hot plate and a mini fridge. But the rent was $600 a month, and Rosa downstairs always saved him leftover tamales. Marcus collapsed onto his mattress without bothering to shower, setting his alarm for 9:30, 2 hours of sleep. Then he'd go see what kind of guilt offering Richard Chen had left him in that safe deposit box. The next morning, Marcus stood in the marble lobby of First National Bank, feeling profoundly out of place. His cleanest jeans still had a faint oil stain on the knee. His jacket was fraying at the cuffs. The security guard eyed him with barely concealed suspicion as he approached the information desk. "I have an appointment with Mr. Henderson regarding a safe deposit box," he said to the receptionist, a woman whose makeup was so perfect it looked airbrushed. She glanced at her computer. "Marcus Chen? That's me. 3rd floor. Take the elevator on your right." Henderson was waiting in a private room, the kind banks reserved for wealthy clients. 2 chairs, a small table, and a box. Just a standard safe deposit box, maybe 12 by 12 inches, made of gray metal with a small lock. "Morning, Marcus," Henderson said, looking more human in the daylight, less like the bearer of bad news. "How are you holding up?" "I'm fine. Let's just get this over with." Henderson handed him a key and a document to sign. "I should mention, your father came in personally to set this up about 3 weeks before he died. He was very specific about the timing, said you shouldn't receive this until after the will reading, after you'd seen what your brothers got." Marcus froze, pen hovering over the signature line. "Why?" "He didn't say. Just that it mattered you understood the context first." Henderson's expression softened. "I've been practicing law for 32 years, Marcus. I've seen a lot of families torn apart by money. But I've also learned that sometimes the things that look worthless are worth more than everything else combined." Marcus signed the document and took the key. His hands were steadier than he expected. "You can leave if you want. I don't need an audience. I'll be right outside if you need anything." Alone in the room, Marcus stared at the box for a long moment. Through the window, he could see the Chicago River, sunlight dancing on its surface, boats moving slowly against the current. What could possibly be in here? Old photographs? A modest check? Maybe some family heirloom Julian and Trevor hadn't wanted. He inserted the key and turned it. The lock clicked open with a sound that seemed too loud in the quiet room. Inside was an envelope. Not a bank envelope or anything official. Just a white envelope, slightly yellowed with age, with Marcus written on it in shaky handwriting. Richard's handwriting from those final weeks when his strength had been failing. Marcus pulled it out. There was something else in the box too. A folded piece of paper that looked old, the creases worn soft. He set it aside and opened the envelope first. The letter inside was written on legal pad paper, the blue lines slightly smudged where Richard's hand had rested. The handwriting deteriorated halfway through, becoming more labored, as if writing it had taken enormous effort. "Marcus," it began, "if you're reading this, I'm gone, and you've just watched your brothers receive millions while you got this box. I imagine you're angry. You should be. You have every right to be. I won't insult you with excuses for my absence from your life. Your mother, Maria, was the best person I ever knew. She was everything my wife wasn't. Genuine, kind, selfless. I was weak. I was a coward. When she told me she was pregnant, I chose my reputation over my son. I chose the easy path over the right one. I've spent 23 years living with that choice, building an empire, raising Julian and Trevor, playing the part of the successful businessman and father, and I was good at it. But every success felt hollow, because I knew what I'd abandoned. Your mother never asked me for a dime, not once, even when I know she was struggling, even when I heard through mutual acquaintances that she was working herself to exhaustion. She had more pride and integrity in her little finger than I've had in my entire body. When she died, something broke in me. I realized I'd lost my chance to make it right with her, but maybe, just maybe, I could try with you. So I found you, and I watched you, Marcus. For months before I introduced myself, I watched you. I saw you give your lunch to a homeless veteran outside your auto shop. I saw you stay 3 hours late to help Miguel fix a single mother's car for free because she couldn't afford the repair. I saw you volunteer at the community center teaching kids basic mechanics. I saw you refuse to take the easy path again and again, even when it cost you. You're everything I wasn't, everything I should have been. Julian and Trevor are my sons, and I love them. But they've never struggled. They've never had to choose between groceries and rent. They've never learned the value of a dollar earned through honest sweat. I gave them everything, and in doing so, I robbed them of the chance to become the kind of man you already are. The cars, the buildings, the portfolios, those are just things. They'll make Julian and Trevor richer, but they won't make them better. They certainly won't make them happy. What I'm giving you is different. In this box, you'll find the one thing I treasured more than all my wealth combined. It's been with me since I was 18 years old, long before I built my business, before I became Richard Chen, the millionaire. It's the thing that got me through the hardest period of my life. I'm giving it to you because you're the only one of my sons who will understand what it really means. You're the only one who knows what it's like to start with nothing and have to build yourself from the ground up. There are 7 words on this paper that changed my life when I was your age. Broke and desperate in a country that wasn't mine, with no family and no prospects. I want them to be yours now. But Marcus, here's the truth I need you to understand. You don't need this paper. You don't need what it represents. You never have. You're already the man I spent my whole life pretending to be. You already have the strength, the character, the decency that I had to learn too late. Still, this is yours. Not as charity, not as guilt money, but as a torch passed from one man to another, as the only thing I have of real value to give. I'm sorry I wasn't your father when you needed one. I'm sorry Maria had to shoulder that burden alone. I'm sorry for all the birthdays, all the moments, all the years I stole from both of you through my cowardice. But I'm not sorry you exist. You're the best thing I ever had a hand in creating, even if I did nothing to deserve the credit. Use this however you see fit, or don't use it at all. The choice is yours, as it should have been from the beginning. With more pride than I earned the right to feel, Richard. Marcus's hands were shaking. He read the letter twice more, the words blurring as his eyes burned. The anger he'd carried into this room had transformed into something more complex, a knot of emotions he couldn't untangle. He set the letter down and picked up the folded paper. It was old, maybe 50 years old, the paper thin and delicate. Coffee stains marked one corner. The creases were so worn they'd nearly torn through. He unfolded it carefully. It was a check, an old check, never cashed, made out to Richard Chen for $850. The signature line read, James Morrison. The memo line said, for the patent rights, and written in marker across the front, in Richard's younger handwriting, 7 words. This is how you start over. Marcus stared at it, not understanding. $850. What patent rights? This check was decades old. Worthless now. He pulled out his phone and searched Richard Chen early career. The results populated slowly, his hand still trembling. The first article was from Forbes, written 10 years ago. From refugee to tech titan, the Richard Chen story. Marcus read, his heart pounding harder with each paragraph. Richard Chen had come to America from Taiwan at 18, with $200 and an engineering degree his mother had sold everything to help him earn. He'd worked in factories, lived in a boarding house with 7 other immigrants, eaten 1 meal a day to save money. At 23, he'd invented a small improvement to semiconductor manufacturing. Nothing revolutionary, but incrementally better. A local businessman, James Morrison, had offered him $850 for the patent rights. For a young immigrant barely scraping by, it was a fortune. Richard had taken the check, held it for 3 days, and then made a choice that defined his life. He'd gone back to Morrison and said no. Instead, he'd asked Morrison to invest in him, to be a partner rather than a buyer. Morrison had laughed at first, but something about Richard's determination had impressed him. That partnership had been the seed that grew into Chen Technologies. The check, never cashed, had become Richard's reminder. Sometimes you have to bet on yourself when no one else will. Sometimes you have to choose the hard path because the easy path costs too much. Marcus sat back in his chair, the check trembling in his hands. $850. Richard's entire fortune had started with his refusal to cash this check, his willingness to risk everything on himself. And now he understood. Julian and Trevor had received things: cars, buildings, money, objects that would depreciate or stay the same, gifts that required nothing of them. Marcus had received a choice, the same choice Richard had faced 50 years ago. He could cash this check. No, he couldn't actually cash it. It was decades old, but that wasn't the point. The point was what it represented. Richard wasn't giving him money. He was giving him permission. Permission to bet on himself. Permission to take risks. Permission to build something from nothing, the way Richard had. But there was more. Marcus turned the check over. On the back, in Richard's handwriting, was a note. First National Bank, account number 47829103, established 1982, in trust for Marcus Chen. Use it or don't, but know it's there. Marcus's pulse quickened. An account, established in 1982, the year Richard's business really started taking off. He stepped out of the room. Henderson was waiting, scrolling through his phone. Mr. Henderson, there's a bank account number in here. Can you check if it's still active? Henderson took the check, examined the back, and made a phone call. His expression shifted as he listened. Yes, I understand. Thank you. He hung up and looked at Marcus with something like awe. Marcus, that account has been growing for 43 years. Your father never touched it. He set it up as a trust, strictly in your name. The moment his business became profitable, he added to it every year on your birthday. How much? Henderson showed him his phone screen. The number didn't make sense at first. Too many digits. Marcus counted them again. 7 figures. The account held over $3 million. The room tilted. Marcus grabbed the edge of the table. That's not possible. It's real. Compound interest over 43 years, plus annual contributions. Your father was quite deliberate about it. But Marcus, there's a condition. Actually, it's not really a condition. More of a request. He left video instructions at the bank. You need to watch them before you can access the money. 20 minutes later, Marcus sat in a private viewing room at the bank. On the screen, Richard Chen looked back at him. Not the frail, dying man Marcus had known, but Richard from 3 years ago. Still strong, still commanding, recording this message when he first learned his heart was failing. Marcus, video Richard said, if you're watching this, you know about the money. I need you to understand why I did it this way. I could have given you everything openly. I could have written you a check after I died for 10 million. 20 million. I could have made you instantly wealthy. But what would that have taught you? What would you have learned about yourself? Instead, I wanted you to know what it feels like to receive nothing, to stand in that conference room and watch your brothers get everything while you get a box. I wanted you to feel that rage, that injustice, that burning humiliation, not because I'm cruel, but because that feeling, that fire, is what you need to remember. Your brothers will spend their inheritance. They'll buy things, invest in safe ventures, maintain the status quo. They've never been hungry, so they don't have the drive to build something that lasts. But you, Marcus, you've been hungry. You know what it costs to struggle. And that check I left you, that worthless piece of paper, that's the real gift. It's a reminder that wealth isn't what someone gives you. It's what you build when you refuse to take the easy path. The money in this account is yours, no strings. Use it however you want. Start a business, buy a house, travel the world. Give it all away. I don't care. But I truly hope, that you'll use it the way I used that moment James Morrison offered me $850. Use it as fuel. Use it as a foundation. Use it to build something that matters, not just to you, but to all the people like us, the ones who start with nothing and have to fight for every inch. Your brothers will be fine. They have money and connections and an easy path forward. But you, Marcus, you have something better. You have hunger. You have empathy. You have the knowledge of what it means to struggle. That's worth more than all my buildings and cars combined. I failed you as a father. I failed your mother as a man. But maybe in this one thing I can give you something useful, not a handout, a foundation, a choice. You can choose to be bitter about the past and you'd be justified. Or you can choose to build a future, your future, on your terms. I bet on myself once, when I was your age. It changed my life. Now, I'm betting on you. Not because you're my son, though you are, but because in the months I knew you, I watched you become the man I always wished I could be. Don't let Julian and Trevor's reaction hurt you. They got what they expected. You got what you earned. The difference matters. Now go build something beautiful. And Marcus, make sure some struggling kid gets a chance the way you're getting one now. Pay it forward. That's the only real legacy that matters. The screen went black. Marcus sat in the silence, tears streaming down his face. Not tears of sadness exactly, but something more complicated. Relief, vindication, overwhelming responsibility, fear, hope. His phone buzzed. Sarah. Did you open the box yet? What was in it? He stared at the message for a long moment, then typed, everything, nothing, both. I'll explain tonight. I love you. Stepping out of the bank into the Chicago afternoon, Marcus felt different. The same city, the same streets, but somehow transformed. A bus roared past, splashing dirty water from a puddle. A street performer played saxophone on the corner, his case open for donations. A woman argued with a parking enforcement officer, her frustrated gestures emphatic. This was still his Chicago, but now it was also Richard's Chicago. The one he'd arrived in with $200 and a dream. The one where impossible things became possible through sheer force of will and refusal to quit. Marcus walked to Millennium Park and sat on a bench facing the bean, watching tourists take selfies in its distorted reflection. He pulled out the old check, the paper soft between his fingers. 7 words. This is how you start over. Except he wasn't starting over. He was starting period. Really starting. With resources and knowledge and a hunger to prove that Richard's bet wasn't misplaced. His phone rang. Miguel. Hey, mijo. You coming in today? Marcus thought about the money, the account, the millions waiting to transform his life. Then he thought about Miguel, who'd given him a job when he was 19 and grieving, who'd taught him not just about cars, but about integrity and craftsmanship and showing up even when you didn't feel like it. Yeah, Marcus said. I'll be there in 20 minutes. Got something I want to talk to you about, though. Everything okay? Everything's different, but yeah, I think it's okay. More than okay. That evening, after his shift, Marcus met Sarah at their favorite spot, a tiny Vietnamese restaurant in Uptown, where the PAO was perfect, and the owner knew them by name. Over spring rolls and strong coffee, he told her everything. The will reading, the humiliation, the letter, the check, the video, the money. Sarah listened without interrupting, her hand finding his across the table. When he finished, she was quiet for a long moment. So what are you going to do? She finally asked. I don't know yet. Part of me wants to march back into that law office and show Julian and Trevor what I got. Prove that I wasn't the one who got screwed. But that's not the point. Richard wasn't trying to make me rich. He was trying to teach me something, and maybe he was trying to learn something too at the end. Maybe this was his way of saying sorry. Do you forgive him? Marcus thought about his mother, working herself to death while Richard played happy families with Julian and Trevor. About all the birthdays Richard missed, all the moments he'd chosen his reputation over his son. I don't know if I forgive him, Marcus said slowly, but I think I understand him better, and maybe that's enough. Sarah squeezed his hand. Whatever you decide to do with the money, I'm with you. I know. Marcus pulled out the old check and set it on the table between them. 7 words changed Richard's life. This is how you start over. He went from immigrant factory worker to millionaire because he refused to take the easy money. What are your 7 words? Sarah asked. Marcus stared at the check, thinking about Miguel's garage, about all the kids in Pilsen who needed mentors and opportunities, about the single mothers whose cars broke down and suddenly they couldn't get to work, couldn't feed their families, about everyone he'd been, everyone he'd helped, everyone he still could help. This is how you pay it forward, he said finally. Sarah smiled. That's 7 words. Yeah, Marcus said. It is. 3 months later, Marcus stood in front of a vacant warehouse in Pilsen, keys in hand. The building was old, brick and iron, with good bones but decades of neglect. It would take work to transform it, but he could see it clearly. A community auto shop, a place where kids could learn trades, where working families could get honest repairs at honest prices, where the next Marcus Chen could find a chance. Julian had called once, 2 months after the will reading. He'd heard somehow about the money, maybe through Henderson, or maybe through the banking network the wealthy occupied. His voice had been cold. I suppose you're quite pleased with yourself. No, Marcus had said truthfully. I'm just trying to figure out what comes next. Father played us all. You, most of all. Maybe. Or maybe he finally did something right. Julian had hung up. They hadn't spoken since. Trevor never called at all. Marcus didn't tell them about his plans. Didn't invite them to the opening. They existed in different worlds now. Always had, really. The will reading had just made it official. Miguel stood beside him, looking at the warehouse with approval. Your old man would be proud. He wasn't my father, Marcus said automatically, then paused. But yeah, maybe he would be. So, what are you going to call it? Marcus thought about the check, about Richard's journey, about his own, about all the people who'd helped him along the way, and all the people who'd need help in the future. Second chance auto, he said, because everybody deserves one. The first person through the door on opening day was a teenage girl, 17 maybe, with oil already under her nails and hope in her eyes. She'd heard they were offering free training programs for kids who couldn't afford trade school. Is it true? She asked. You really teach people for free? Marcus thought about being 19, lost and grieving, and Miguel giving him a chance. He thought about Richard at 18, stepping off a plane with $200 and terror and determination. He thought about his mother, sacrificing everything so he could have a chance at something better. It's true, he said. When can you start? Her smile was sunrise breaking over Lake Michigan. On the wall behind his desk, Marcus hung two things. The letter from Richard, framed now, a reminder of complicated grace and late redemption, and the check, that old piece of paper with 7 words that changed 2 lives, soon to change more. This is how you start over, but Marcus had added his own 7 words beneath it, in permanent marker. This is how you pay it forward. The numbers in his bank account would change lives, but it was the words, the old ones and the new ones, that would change the world. 1 transmission, 1 brake job. 1 kid given a chance at a time. Outside, Chicago hummed and roared, indifferent to stories of redemption and inheritance and the complicated mathematics of being a father's son. But inside Second Chance Auto, something impossible was becoming real. A man who'd received nothing was building everything, and 7 words written by 2 different hands were changing the world.